Hello, everybody, and welcome. We have about 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so we're going to give a couple minutes here to let everybody get into the room and get settled, and then we'll be getting started. I see we have some more people coming in, so we'll be getting started here in about a minute. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this Friday afternoon, morning, evening, midnight, whatever time it is in your time zone. We appreciate you hanging around with us today. We have our paper presentation of Nature and Impact of African National Student Dissertations, 2013 to 2018. My name is Matt Rupp. I will be your host today from the Center for Faculty Excellence. And before we get started with the presentation, we're going to go through a little bit of Zoom tips and tricks. So bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll notice a button that says Audio Settings. If you click that button, there will be some settings there that pop up. For now, the microphones are muted. But if you do have any problem hearing the audio, you can click that and adjust your speakers. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there's some icons down there. A couple of them that we'll be using today is the chat icon and the closed caption icon. We have Sarah, our captioner, here today, who's transcribing for us. So if you want to follow along with the subtitles, you can click that closed caption and they'll pop up. And we also have the chat button for if you want to participate and interact with the presenters today. We will be moderating the chat, so if you have any questions, comments as you go through, please feel free to post them in there. If you have any technical questions, I will be following up on those, and the content questions the presenters will be following up on. You'll notice that in this image here, there's two options for the chat. One says all panelists and one says all panelists and attendees. Really strongly encourage you to make sure it says all panelists and attendees. That way everybody in the room can see if you have a comment or a question. At the top of your screen, there's a button that says View Options. Sometimes when we're presenting, the window ratio gets a little messed up. So if you want to go into full screen or exit full screen, you can click that button there and adjust the window size. And then you'll notice it's not indicated here, but in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's a button that says Leave Meeting. So if at any time in the presentation, hopefully not until the end, you have to leave the meeting, please feel free to click that button there. Okay, so now I'm going to hand the presentation over to Dr. Lin and Dr. Adeoye, who are going to introduce themselves and carry on the presentation. So Dr. Lin.
Thank you so much, Matt. Really, really appreciate it. And so we thought we'd take a little time to introduce ourselves and tell a little bit of our story of how we got together as we move on to talking about the presentation. I'm Laura Knight-Lin, been with Walden quite a while, first in the College of Education, started in 2003. And in that role, I attended, at a certain point, I was in a full-time role and in a coordinator role, and I went to almost every residency. That's an important part of the story that I'll get to later on at that time. And then I came to the Center for Research Quality. So that gave me the opportunity to see and experience, so many dissertations across disciplines and meet so many different students and faculty. And my great colleague, Blessing, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we can kind of tell the story of how we met.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I First of all, my name is Blessing Adeoye. I'm a faculty member of College of Education and Leadership. My specialization is in educational technology. And I joined Walden University in 2015. Pretty much I've been mentoring PhD students and EDD in the area of educational technology. In 2018, I was involved in the research, Walden's research symposium, where I gave a poster presentation. So many people went through, asked me questions, and I came across Dr. Laura Lynn. She stopped and talked to me, and I find out we do have something in common. The area of my research interest is almost, she was interested in what I was doing. We talked about how we could collaborate. And since then, we've been talking, we've been doing different work together. And that's one of the work we are presenting today is the work that we have been doing together. Because of this common link and of interest, we are able to be here today to give this presentation. And I'm hoping that as you listen to us and also look at the poster presentation that we also put out there, hopefully we'll be able to find some other people that might be interested in what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Blessing. Yes, as Blessing was saying, we met. He had a great poster looking at undergraduate Nigerian students at the Open University and their learning preferences and motivation. And myself, interested in our doctoral students, and having had experiences with many students at residencies and through just various documents, and discussions, I really had the interest with looking at our African nationals doctoral students. So we started talking, and that led to what he was referring to that we'll talk a little bit more about. Is we have a poster posted as well. It's on learning preferences and support opportunities for African national students. We want to make sure to also give a special thanks to the hard work of our two research assistants on this project. It's a grant-funded project through the Research in Distance Education Fellowship that helped us get started. Brenda Lee Cato and Valerie Morgan. They were very helpful in the input, which we'll talk about. We get into the methodology of the input of collecting some of the data from dissertations. All of us did it, myself, Blessing, and also our research assistants split up getting the information from our dissertations during that time span. Next slide, please. So we kind of started to talk about this, but the background and purpose is, in addition to our own conversations, we started talking with many of our faculty administrators about their experiences, and they informally noted, and I've seen as well in our, when we're preparing for accreditation, really compelling and impactful studies seen in, residency advising sessions, in various dissertation committees, looking at dissertation abstracts. Well, we knew those are just conversations. Those are just things that we are feeling and we're knowing, but really this study is the start of, let's start to look at this systematically and really understand and know what are African national students, what is it that they're studying, and what type of studies are these, and really the one thing though, and that's if you can go to the next slide, I think that's really important, is this is a piece of a lot of bigger questions that we're very interested in. So in partnership, so that's why we worked on, people might think, why did we do 2 projects in the same year? We were just burning to answer 2 different questions in support of our African national students, or at least get started with them. We realized there's just so much more to look at. And this one is looking at the nature of our doctoral student research, but also importantly looking at the learning preferences and support opportunities for our students. And in that study, we had 14 students interviewed. Blessing interviewed them, had them transcribed by a graduate assistant in Nigeria. and with really important stories of their experiences, where we're heard a lot of both what motivated them, which was interesting, as well as obstacles faced. And there were some really strong and consistent obstacles that I think can help us or any university where African national students are attending. And then, but it takes us broader because we really are interested in, while we would love to inform Walden and other similar institutions, we're also, we want to know about the education landscape, the employment opportunities for graduates, and we're reaching out, and that's why we're open to more collaborators. We started working with another Walden faculty member, starting conversations to start look at the education landscape and employment opportunities. So we really know, as we're looking at the broader social change issues in continental Africa, we can start putting these pieces together. And so we've had some conversations with Jose Casa, who brings a wealth of information. And so we're excited about starting to, so this is really part of a bigger team, and or hopefully a bigger team, but a broader team and a broader area of investigation. So while I put other areas in question mark, is we're really in the discovery process to answer broader questions for the field. Did you want to say more about that, Blessing?
Yeah, the first study that Laura was responding to was to, the purpose of the study was to understand online African national doctoral students' doctoral experience within a large US and online university that serves students internationally. We realized that that particular study and this study, they have a lot in common. In fact, this particular presentation we are given is like another step further from that particular previous study. So we find common interest from that study and this particular study.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so here we're going to go ahead, spend a little time on the methodology. Blessing, go ahead with the.
Okay, I just want to jump in here and indicate that we focus on 3 research questions on this particular study. The first one is, what field and topic areas have African national students researched in dissertation from 2013 to 2018? Also, what populations have been targeted in African national dissertations? What methodological approaches were used in these studies? And the fourth one is, what categories of social change impact are represented in those studies?
Right, yes, and while thinking broadly, this is what we want to look at, then we had to figure out, well, how are we going to do this? So what we did is we used a tool you may be familiar with basically to conduct what is a metasynthesis study, but we used a tool called Email Me Forms. Some of you may be familiar with it in different ways of data collection and creating databases, but it's basically a fill-in form. So what I wanted to do, and what we both agreed would be a good idea, is to create this form that each of us could look at specific aspects of the dissertation and fill things in. And so you can have a combination of, open-ended input, but you can also have some forced choice input, mutually exclusive, not mutually exclusive. And so that's what the form, so it could be a very streamlined process for putting that information in. And so included in that were, we're like the numbers of participants, the specific methodology, statistical significance, the field and setting, as well as, social change and all the other areas. And so we had to kind of work together, though, to, get our process down among ourselves and the research assistants. And so really targeting specific areas of the dissertation to look at first, which would be the abstract specific areas of chapter 1, but also needing to scan through into areas of chapter 3, and then particularly within chapter 5, for those conclusions and social change implications. So after some discussion and practice and checking our methods for doing this, we had a sense that we had a good routine and some consistency. As you'll notice, compared to maybe some other qualitative studies, this was more, this was not inductive. It was, based on specific categories that we're looking at, but there were opportunities for open-ended description. And so this resulted, when you put things in email me forms, it results in a spreadsheet format to collect the information. And so some of these things that were more forced choice aspects, we could actually run through SPSS for more of a descriptive and frequencies type of review. But there did end up being some basic coding for some of the more open-ended areas. All right. Next slide. So I want to talk about something too. So, well, we got access to doctoral student capstones in the beginning. As we started to review, it became clear to me we needed to focus primarily, not primarily, only on dissertations, PhD dissertations. As you know, at Walden, we have a variety of capstones and that are doctoral level, but there was enough difference that it would be difficult. Like we had at first when we were looking, we had a good bunch of DBA doctoral studies, but they're structured differently and they had a bit of different emphasis in how they were put together. So it felt like it would really just not be consistent to include that. So we decided for this particular study to focus on PhD dissertations. And so you'll see that, we had a good portion coming from the health sciences, but also a decent portion coming from CMT and CSBS. All right. And then if we're from the Richard W. Riley College. Next slide, please. So I thought it was important when we received the data for, when we had received approval from institutional approval and OIRA provided us with the data, we were able to know the nation of origin for these particular students. So you'll see 12 representative nations, and 35 were from Nigeria. So that's the highest percentage, 56.5%. And Blessing and I talked about that. Did you want to talk about maybe why that might be?
Yes, I would like to. There are two things I would like to say here. First of all, Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, and I believe there are many universities. However, there are shortage of universities for the fast growing population in Nigeria. For that reason, many students started looking for admission opportunity outside the country, and I believe what the university has been a place where many have been welcome. Of course, they were scattered all over the continent in many places. However, I believe they do find many of the programs that they were interested in at Walden University. That might probably give us some of the reasons why we do have so many large number of Nigeria, which is 35, but 56.5% on this study.
Right. So it seems to make a lot of sense given what we know in terms of it being very populous and the educational opportunities. So that's that makes sense. Next slide, please. So we started looking at the topics, and we were able to categorize them, or have them in the following categories, general categories of building and industry, corporate, community services, economics, food services, gold mining, government, health education, health services, higher education, K-12, education operations, nonprofit, parenting, policy, prison, and women's issues. And so, one thing that was consistent across all is all of the findings, all of the work were relevant to the people, industries, and institutions in continental Africa. Even those business-oriented topics were focused on services, support, and operations. But as you notice, you know, health services and health education were, you know, clearly the most frequent. Next slide. And so, you know, health services and in health education, we had HIV, hepatitis, malaria, female genital mutilation, prenatal and postnatal care. And then in health services topics, epidemiology studies, and I'll get into that later, very, very strong epidemiology studies, nursing, clinician, and primary care awareness, and preparation, among other topics. Did you want to talk through the next blessing? I don't know. The blessing, did you want to talk through the next? Okay.
The business management topic. Can you Laura,
Right.
can you
Yes.
repeat what? Yes, I'm sorry. I just lost you a little bit here.
Oh, okay. No, no. I just had said, did you want to go through the next the next the bullets?
Okay. Yes. The business and management topics included banking, finance, factory work, farming, supply chain, workforce topics, and leadership strategies. These are common topics in many areas of study, in many places in Nigeria, because these are the areas where development are needed. Then again, when we now look at education topics, and this include approaches of principals and teachers, smartphone innovation education, child labor and education, school overcrowding among these topics. And last but not the least are the issues concerning government and policy. This often overlap across many of the topics that we look at. Some studies were collecting data from government officials, or some also collected their data from, within the government as well.
Next slide, yes. Okay, this is something where we just kind of put it in a graphic because they don't cluster. These were just all kind of to show the scope of participants, of the types of data sources or participants or subjects. And so we're not going to read them all for you, but you know, you see healthcare providers, you'll see a lot of mothers of different types of infants, ex-prisoners, it's specific large data sets, and we're going to get into that later, that we're, you know, specific large data sets used. Children, university students, bank leaders, pregnant women. So there's a diversity of, and in some specific, as you see in HIV and HIV education, specific households. So we just wanted to kind of give that picture of the variety, the wide variety of data sources, both from data sets and direct data collection. And there was a use of, you know, a lot of both in-person and remote data collection, as well as data sets. Next slide. Okay, so this is really a kind of a combination of data collection and a bit of methodology discussion. So you'll see a you know, a large portion of quantitative studies, and then another large portion, about 39%, were qualitative studies, and less so mixed methods. But for statistical significance, we had just the vast majority of statistical significance. You'll see, though, where we have a bunch that are not applicable, as you'd understand, because of having the significant portion of qualitative studies. What I want to emphasize here, and this is important to note here too, is you look at the different methods of data collection. In many cases, especially when they're qualitative, they're not mutually exclusive. There was a large amount of strong triangulation, multiple sources of data collection in the qualitative studies. And in the quantitative studies too, there was often, you know, combinations of data collection, but a lot of surveys were conducted And then a good amount for quantitative of use of existing data sets. Next slide. So in terms of range, we wanted to get a sense of the, how many people. So you'll see a minimum of 0, where they're just, we're really maybe just looking at some documents or overview, but a maximum of 19,000, 2014, 19,214, I mean. And that's because it's a very large existing data set. But you'll see a mode of 30, which makes sense considering the large amount of qualitative studies. And Blessing, did you want to say more about that at all, or otherwise we can?
I just want to mention that the ranges of the sample ranges here, especially in the way the students use the personal information here, or personal contact, or remote methods. These are very common because of the difficulty of reaching out to some of the participants is common among the students to use that particular method. I believe that is the reason why we have a large number of students using that particular method to collect data.
Right. And so what we're noticing as we're going through things here that was really starting to hit us is, as you've seen, the large amount of health sciences studies, large amount of statistical significance, triangulation, sophisticated data analytic techniques, very common. And so that, that was something we were really taking note of. Next slide. Oh, so social change implications in dissertations. So we, after kind of reviewing, what we were seeing in these sections, we came up with these particular categories. And I need to be very, very clear here that in most cases, they were not mutually exclusive. And most commonly combined, we would see informed policy with community improvement and change. Also often, or we'd see it combined with business improvement or policy combined with program development and just about all of, not all of them, but many of them while informing future research. And so, and you can kind of see the spread there, but that as we looked at social change, and I will say this particular aspect is something we could have a whole deeper study on that. This was kind of our first review of what we saw there, but in terms of levels of social change and impact. And one thing we were discussing recently, Blessing and I, is informed policy. And when you think about policy, that could be government policy, but it can also be organizational policies, school policies. So I think that's an area where we'd like to maybe do a little bit more of a deeper dive. The other piece that I think is really important, and this is, we'll get into when we talk about areas of future research, is when you're writing your dissertation and you talk about how this can inform social change and recommendations, what would be really, really interesting to find out is from these students is what they were able to do next, what they were able to impact in terms of application. I think that's an interesting area. This was one of those studies where I think the more we looked at it, the more questions and the more additional studies we were thinking of. And I remember Blessing mentioned too, just an interest too, of this is what we looked at here at Walden, but what about, what are people seeing in other universities as well, online and traditional. Anything else that you would like to say on that slide, Blessing?
Well, I just want I believe you have mentioned those things that are very critical here, but one thing that I have to just mention one more time is the community improvement and social change. This happen to be critical in most of the study that we see, and it's still going to continue because there's a lot of emphasis on that. And the other thing that you mentioned, which is critical, is the policy, informed policy, educational policy especially. Then with the health issues, some of the studies that we find in health is the policies related to health issues as well. These are needed, and many students are still looking at that. So I just want to mention.
Right, great. Next slide, please. So in terms of conclusions and recommendations, we're, as we kind of indicated, we had some ideas and interests going into this, and thoughts based on the experiences we've had with students about the nature of studies. And so the strength was confirmed. There were some things, though, that I found really interesting discoveries even at this initial level, which was how many really, really strong healthcare studies were being conducted, and with real potential for impact in terms of health education practices and approaches, and really looking at but then when we look at, and thinking ahead to things like, if they were to go ahead and publish and present or ask for grants within different organizations, the strength of the methodology, I think, is a really important factor as well to to note. And when we think about different things going on, I thought that this is really critical. So that was exciting. So I like I'd mentioned, we're really interested as well in what's next. Like, it would be great to know what these students were able to do, or these graduates were able to do, I should say, with this exciting work. And also, maybe what that other things that might have led to for them, within their organizations. We really want to emphasize, though, that this is part of, like we said in the beginning, a piece of our broader interest of, looking at, education for African national students and the potential for social change in continental Africa. So when we look at, in the study that we talk about in the poster, where we've learned some really exciting things from these firsthand interviews, talking about their experiences, talking about their, what motivated them, what helped them, what were the best things. They talked the importance of having, helpful chairs and all the different specific resources that help them, but also significant, specific obstacles that I think were really helped us see some important opportunities. And a lot of, again, that study, I think, for us too, led to questions for further studies. So it was nice to be able to be doing these at the same time, looking at the nature and impact of the great work of our African national students, and then also be thinking about their experiences and how we can, support our African national students and help more students in their success. So we're also looking at practical things. We'd like, when it comes to, here at Walden, but also, very specific, opportunities and recommendations from that. And then, I do think it'd be interesting, and Blessing, raised this idea to look at additional dissertations from other universities, just to see if the things that we're seeing are similar. Again, that might, relate to, different preparation and things like that. But I think it's, as we want to look broadly at the impact in terms of education. So Blessing, would you like to say more about some of the conclusions and recommendations and your reflections?
Yes, I just want to mention that in most of the studies that we look at, many or most of African national graduates, they are so passionate about the kind of dissertation that they were doing. And one of the reasons is because they were looking at actual problems and looking at the way to go back home and make changes, to effect changes, to go back home and make sure that something works. So most of that's the reason we see the passion in what they were doing. And as we are looking at all different topics and all the different work that these students have done, and one of the things that we are looking at in to-do list to find out, how can we support what they are doing? How can we really contribute to effect those kind of social change in Africa? How can we also encourage students to be able to pursue all these topics that in which they are passionate about. So we look at all this, and I believe one of the things that we are looking for is to be able to look at further research, looking into other universities, as Laura mentioned. Are we going to find the same thing that we find at Waldo University? Do we have the same kind of students that have the same kind of passion about what they are doing? Do they have the same kind of challenges that we also find in our other studies? So putting all this together, I believe this study is a continuous work. We have not really, we are not done yet. However, we are able to identify certain things. We are able to find so many things. We are still looking for more in order for us to be able to come up with, to go to the next step in our studies, and dealing with our African national graduates. Thank you very much.
Right. Yes, thank you, Blessing. And I think that's, one thing is we had talked about the beginning in terms of our story of meeting each other in the research symposium. We're both excited about presenting here and sharing the poster and connecting with more people who have similar research interests and are doing similar work or have been thinking and maybe doing, thinking about similar types of things. So we're really excited about those potential, connections. And so we're, hopefully, other than this session, find us on the app, reach out to us via email, and, we're happy to, we just want to continue learning and growing in this area. And I think if you want to go to the next slide, then we can get to the questions, I think. Yeah, so just a few references among our many references, but we did look at, one thing I wanted to point out is the Grossman reference that had different findings than ours, where looked at a content analysis of many dissertations from South African medical school. But it's really important to note that as a medical school where they had this add-on mini dissertation, so they decided to discontinue it because that they weren't finding the strength in the studies, but it has a very different context than a PhD dissertation. So we looked at other types of content stuff, but I just wanted to call that out because it had different type of findings, but in a very different type of context. Next slide, which questions. So yes, I'm going to check out the chat here, and but also we can keep the questions coming. Let's see. Also, hello, Jose, who's with us today. And very exciting. We're excited about our work that, as you see, is in that original graphic where we're really looking to expand what we're doing and the impact. And then Darcy mentioned the using of forms. Yes, that was very helpful. Yes, and the truth is, Darcy, I would have it's one of those things you learn by doing. So I guess the tips and tricks I would have is, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to share the process of but it is that sort of systematic figuring out how can we put this together, trial by error until we got it right. I know there was a couple times Blessing and I practicing, and I'm like, nope, I need to revise it to make it easier and more streamlined. But because we've been through this experience, I'm happy to support anyone or answer any questions or walk anybody through. And I think we'll continue to learn. I notice, Bill, you mentioned, yes, we would love to do an interest group like that. That would be fantastic. Morris. Okay, fantastic. Morris has had some of the students in these countries. Could you expand a little on the considerations involved in the application of this analytical technique? Yes, it was really a process, and that's a really good question. As we're going through the different qualitative books and processes, and then turning that into a systematic process that could be done amongst 4 people for consistent input. So we're looking at it. We didn't want just reading dissertations and taking notes. It was like we needed to look at. We identified specific sections to get started. So we'd say, we're going to look at these particular, the abstract in these particular sessions. And then those that could be easy choices, those were the forced choices, and those that were the categories we looked at that were more broad. And sometimes we realized, we'd need to kind of pare that down a little bit. So it did take a little practice to get the form right, but then also to figure out how much, because like I said, this wasn't really, I wouldn't call this an inductive study, but it was, really kind of straightforward in terms of the things that would come out. So it was that process of kind of combining, in terms of this. So some of it is, really just kind of straightforward choices. And, we're like, we're looking at numbers of participants, programs, all of those kind of straight data. And then things where it was like methodology, that was one when they're describing the methodology. Or, so, and sometimes what we did is we had, because we wanted to be sure. So we'd have a forced choice, but we'd also have a box to make sure we were right. So for like social change implications, we could still have a description of what that was as well. And so, yes, we looked at, and there was different, I know there's different approaches to that, but that seemed to work for this first, I would say, level of a review of the dissertations. As I look at different things, like particularly social change, I think that could take a deeper dive. That could take, that's something when I look at it, I'd like to dig in a little bit more. And, maybe even looking a little bit deeper into the analytical techniques, that would be something as well. But yeah, it was a fun study to do. And it was interesting. It's a fun study to do side by side with what was the interview study, which was a truly inductive type of coding process. So it really, we were going in different directions qualitatively at the same time. Other questions? And yeah, we're happy to also to anyone who wants to reach out to us through the app separately. We're really excited to, that's one thing that I think is just so exciting about this conference, is seeing the diversity of people's interests and what they're working on. And I actually saw in some of the other studies some things that I want to follow up on that I think can actually inform some of our work and thinking in this particular area.
Thank you. It looks like we're coming towards the end of our time here. So yeah, so if anybody has any last minute questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Oh, someone said the purpose of the study, which I think is very important. Yes. So the purpose of the study was to really understand the nature of what our African national students are doing in their research for their dissertations. And so we could understand that in the context of comparing it to the experiences that they're having. But we also looked at the strength and the potential impact of the dissertation. So that's why we looked at the social change piece as well. So yeah, and that's the thing, and it maybe you might have missed at the beginning, is it's a piece of a variety of things that we want to look at in terms of looking at African education, education for African students, and social change in continental Africa. Yes. Thanks so much, Jusay. Very, very, so glad you could be here. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. And Morris, thank you.
Okay, well, it looks like we're over our time. So just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. Thank you very much, Dr. Lin and Dr. Adeoye for presenting today. Want to give a big thanks to everybody for joining, and especially to Sarah, our captioner. Just want to hope everybody has a great weekend and enjoy the rest of your evening,
Oh.
morning or afternoon.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was just really, really appreciate your participation and your listening to us share our journey in this research.
Thank you very much, too.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay.